When Queen Zenobia's generals were dragged before the Roman emperor outside the shattered walls of Antioch in 272 CE, they expected execution, swift, brutal, and final. What they witnessed instead was something far more calculated, far more sinister. Rome didn't just kill its defeated rulers, it broke them. It transformed proud monarchs who once commanded armies and governed nations into living monuments to imperial power, paraded through streets like exotic animals, stripped of everything that made them human. And for female rulers, the brutality was designed not just to defeat them, but to erase their very dignity in the most visceral, stomach-turning ways imaginable. What Roman soldiers and officials did to captured queens went beyond warfare, beyond politics. It was systematic humiliation elevated to state policy, and the historical accounts are absolutely horrifying. Here's what makes this even more disturbing. These weren't random acts of violence by rogue soldiers. This was legal. This was sanctioned. This was celebrated. Under Roman law, the moment you were defeated in battle, you ceased to exist as a person. You became property. It didn't matter if you were a queen who ruled millions, if you commanded fleets and armies, if your lineage stretched back centuries. The second you fell into Roman hands, every protection, every right, every shred of legal dignity vanished instantly. The principle was called ius gentium, the law of nations, and it was ruthlessly clear. Military defeat transformed free people into property of the Roman state. Queens who had negotiated treaties, who had been addressed as equals by Roman officials just months before, suddenly had no more legal standing than a common foot soldier captured on some forgotten battlefield. Think about what that actually meant. Roman citizens had rights, real, enforceable rights. Flogging a Roman citizen without proper legal procedure was scandalous enough to end political careers. Executing a citizen without trial could spark riots, could bring down magistrates, could change the course of history. But foreign captives, no protection whatsoever. They could be mistreated, displayed like trophies, sold into slavery, or killed at their captor's complete discretion. Gender didn't matter. Royal blood didn't matter. Nothing mattered except one brutal fact. You lost, and now you belonged to Rome. This wasn't some vague, informal understanding either. These principles were literally carved into the foundation of Roman law going back to the 12 tables in the 5th century BCE. For nearly 1,000 years, Roman legal tradition was crystal clear. Prisoners of war became property of the Roman state. Period. Women of royal lineage who had lived their entire lives wielding power, making life and death decisions, commanding respect from even the mightiest warriors. They discovered that all of it meant absolutely nothing the moment chains closed around their wrists. The historian Tacitus documented the treatment of defeated British royalty with language that's shocking even by ancient standards, and Roman officials showed absolutely no hesitation in violating former rulers in ways that would make your stomach turn. And here's the thing that makes this exponentially worse. Roman military culture regarded captured women as literal spoils of war. Sure, elite prisoners might be housed relatively comfortably if there was potential for ransom or negotiation, but most faced immediate degradation. The line between prisoner of war and slave existed only on paper. In practice, defeat dissolved all former status, all former power, all former humanity. You were an object now, to be used however Rome saw fit. But Rome's cruelty wasn't just about breaking people. It was about showing it off. Enter the Roman triumph, one of the most spectacular and disturbing public spectacles in human history. This wasn't just a victory parade. This was psychological warfare transformed into mass entertainment, and captive royalty served as the centerpiece. The generals celebrating the triumph needed Senate permission, and the standards were high. You needed to have killed at least 5,000 enemies in battle and added significant territory to the empire. But if you met those standards, Rome gave you one of the most elaborate displays of power the ancient world had ever seen. The procession route covered about 4 kilometers, from the Field of Mars through the Forum and up to the Capitoline Hill, and every meter was packed with Roman citizens screaming, cheering, celebrating their city's dominance. The choreography was deliberate and devastating. Musicians and entertainers led the parade. Then came carts loaded with paintings and models of the conquered cities, showing Romans exactly what their legions had destroyed. Wild animals from exotic territories reminded everyone how far Roman power extended. And then, at the heart of it all, came the prisoners of war walking in shackles. Captured rulers marched at the very front of the prisoner column. And here's where it gets truly diabolical. Their royal garments were often left intact. They wore their crowns, their ceremonial robes, their jewelry, everything that marked them as royalty. The contrast was the entire point. Regalia plus bondage equals absolute domination. Queens shuffled through Roman streets in chains, dressed in their finest, before jeering crowds numbering in the hundreds of thousands. The message couldn't have been clearer. No kingdom is beyond our reach. No throne guarantees safety. No power can stand against Rome. This served multiple functions simultaneously. It demonstrated Roman military might to the citizenry. It satisfied the population's bloodlust with visible, tangible proof of victory. But most importantly, it provided a stage for the systematic degradation of defeated rulers. Female captives endured the gaze of thousands while being stripped of every vestige of dignity, walking slowly enough that every spectator could observe every detail, every humiliation, every moment of their fall from power. And it wasn't quick. This journey took an entire day. The procession moved deliberately slowly, maximizing the spectacle, ensuring every citizen along the route got their full view of the broken rulers. Captive queens walked those 4 kilometers knowing their fate hung in the balance. Some would survive this ordeal and live on in captivity. Others wouldn't see the sunset. That uncertainty itself served as a form of torture. The not knowing weighing on them with every shuffling step through streets designed to celebrate their destruction. Now, about Zenobia. Her story is so shocking, so visceral. It's almost hard to believe, except we have multiple historical sources confirming the details. This woman had carved out an empire stretching from Egypt to Anatolia. She challenged Roman authority across the entire Eastern Mediterranean. She was brilliant, ruthless, and terrifyingly effective. In 272 CE, Emperor Aurelian crushed her forces and captured her while she was fleeing toward Persia. She became the perfect symbol for Aurelian's triumph. And what Rome did to her in 274 CE has been documented in ways that make it impossible to look away. The Historia Augusta provides detailed descriptions that were likely based on eyewitness testimony, and the accounts are simultaneously magnificent and horrifying. Zenobia was adorned with jewels that caught the sunlight as she walked, transformed into a glittering monument to Rome's power. But here's the detail that really drives home the calculated cruelty. Her chains were made of gold. Not simple iron shackles meant merely to restrain her. No, these were heavy golden chains, so massive that guards walked beside her helping to bear the weight. Let that sink in. The choice of gold was absolutely deliberate. It symbolized the wealth she had commanded, the riches she had controlled, the prosperity of the territory she had ruled. All of it turned into the instrument of her bondage. Her entire person became a walking display of conquered riches. Every step a reminder that everything she had built, everything she had been, now belonged to Rome. The weight alone would have been agonizing, but the symbolism was even more crushing. Your power, your wealth, your empire, we're using it all to humiliate you before the world. What's almost more disturbing is what happened next. Zenobia maintained remarkable composure throughout this ordeal. Multiple sources comment on how she carried herself with dignity despite the weight, despite the hours of marching, despite the jeering crowds. That defiance might have actually saved her life. Aurelian was impressed by her bearing and calculated that her continued existence served his purposes better than her death. He granted her a villa near Rome. Some accounts claim she married a Roman senator. She became part of the aristocratic society, her daughters eventually marrying into noble families. Was that mercy? Or was it the subtlest form of humiliation, keeping her alive as a permanent, living reminder of Rome's power? Historians still debate it. But think about what it meant. The queen who once threatened Rome's eastern provinces lived out her days as a comfortable dependent, a permanent demonstration that even the mightiest queens could be reduced to relying on Roman generosity for their survival. But if Zenobia's story is calculated humiliation, then what happened to Boudicca and her daughters is pure, unfiltered horror. This is where Roman treatment of captured queens moves from degradation into territory that's genuinely difficult to discuss. When the Iceni king Prasutagus died in 60 CE, he tried to be clever. His will bequeathed half his territory to Emperor Nero and half to his daughters, hoping this compromise would preserve some independence while satisfying Rome's appetite for expansion. The strategy failed catastrophically. Roman officials led by the procurator Decianus Catus ignored the will entirely, seized all lands and property, and declared the entire kingdom forfeit. When Queen Boudicca protested, she faced a punishment designed to demonstrate the complete worthlessness of royal status under Roman occupation. Tacitus recorded what happened next with unusual directness for a Roman historian, and his account is absolutely chilling. Boudicca was publicly subjected to corporal punishment, flogged like a common criminal. The flogging alone was a profound violation. Remember, beating a Roman citizen required serious legal justification. Flogging an allied queen was deliberate, calculated humiliation. But the soldiers didn't stop there. Her daughters, likely teenagers and unmarried, were violated by Roman soldiers. Tacitus's language is sparse, but it conveys the historian's horror at what occurred. These events violated even Roman sensibilities, and Tacitus places these crimes at the center of his explanation for the rebellion that followed. Here's what makes it even more sickening. This wasn't random violence by undisciplined troops. This was calculated degradation designed to break the royal family and demonstrate Roman dominance. And critically, it wasn't done in secret. The humiliation was performed before the Iceni people. The abuse was committed where the subjects could witness it, sending a brutal message about the fate awaiting anyone who resisted Rome. The physical abuse was meant to terrorize an entire population into submission. The strategy backfired spectacularly. The abuse ignited a rebellion that nearly drove Rome from Britain entirely. Boudicca raised an army that destroyed 3 Roman cities, including Londinium, modern London, and massacred tens of thousands of Roman citizens and allies. Tacitus preserves a speech where she declares she's fighting as a woman, avenging not just her own abuse, but her daughter's violated honor. But the rebellion ended in defeat at an unknown battlefield where Roman discipline overcame larger British forces. Tacitus claims Boudicca poisoned herself rather than face capture again. As for her daughters, Their fate goes unrecorded. They simply vanish from historical accounts after that initial violation, erased from history as thoroughly as they were violated by Roman soldiers. Now, for those captives who survived the triumph itself, there was often one final horror waiting: execution. While the triumph continued toward the Temple of Jupiter on Capitoline Hill, condemned prisoners were led aside to the Mamertine prison, known as the Tullianum. This ancient structure, built into the slope of the Capitoline Hill, was the final stop for Rome's most notable enemies, and it was designed for one purpose: making people disappear. The prison had two levels. The upper served as a holding cell, but the lower chamber was pure nightmare. It was accessible only through a hole in the ceiling. Prisoners were lowered into this execution chamber in complete darkness, surrounded by filth, where they faced death by suffocation or starvation. The process was deliberately hidden, while crowds celebrated above. Rome's enemies died in the darkness below. Vercingetorix, the Gallic chieftain who had unified the tribes against Julius Caesar, was held in this prison for 6 years after his defeat at Alesia in 52 BC, when he was finally paraded in Caesar's triumph in 46 BC. Eyewitnesses said he appeared broken by his long captivity. After the procession ended, he was led to the Tullianum and executed. Jugurtha, king of Numidia, met an even more brutal end following Marius's triumph in 104 BCE. He was lowered into the Tullianum's lower chamber, where he went mad with terror, then left to starve over 6 days. Plutarch recorded his final words: "How cold this Roman bath is!" His cries echoed from the underground chamber while Rome celebrated above. The Jewish leader Simon Bar Jora, who was displayed in Titus's triumph after Jerusalem's destruction in 70 CE, was executed at the traditional site in the Forum. Josephus documented how the procession paused at the Temple of Jupiter, while everyone awaited confirmation that the execution had been carried out before the religious ceremonies could conclude. Death was part of the ritual, the final act in Rome's theatrical display of absolute power. Here's what all of this reveals: the treatment of captured queens wasn't about military necessity or security. It was about power, about control, about sending messages that echoed across continents and centuries. Roman legal protections evaporated at the boundary of conquest. The dignity of nobility dissolved in defeat. What happened to these women? The chains, the display, the violations, the executions. These were calculated policies designed to break resistance and demonstrate that no power, no matter how great, could stand against Rome. The Mamertine prison's walls still stand today, a physical reminder that Rome's triumphs were built on human suffering, that queens were reduced from commanders to spectacles, that degradation was transformed into mass entertainment. The cost of empire was written in broken lives and stolen dignity, and Rome made sure everyone watched.